Thank you. Glenn Lewis, the director of the journalism program, gave a lot of thank yous, but I want to make sure Joanne Glenn, again, she helped us get this thing off the ground. Claire Serant has managed the whole thing, including part one, and a lot of the wrangling of the guests and the ideas. So I want to make sure they are recognized once again for the work they've done on this ongoing conversation that we're having. So I want to, without a whole lot more of formalities, I want to simply introduce the guests and start with a few rounds of questions, and then leave plenty of time for us to brainstorm where you guys can ask questions. You ask our experts what they think, our journalists what they think, and maybe they're going to have some questions for you about what people in your generation are doing when it comes to social media, specifically in journalism, maybe how you're using it to follow things the things you love, the topics you really enjoy. Before I introduce the guests, though, I have one Twitter story to tell you, okay? In my neighborhood in Brooklyn, we don't have just a grocery store, we have a food co-op. Now, without going off on a tangent, it's a political, crazy atmosphere, but it's an amazing store. One of the issues in this political atmosphere is called BDS, boycott, divest, and sanction. And it's a horrific argument about the Middle East, Israeli-Arab issue. I do not want to go into it. But I went to a meeting that was on that topic. And people were yelling and screaming and protesting and also trying to make short speeches on the mic. During those speeches, I was sitting with two neighbors, and they were following the Twitter feed that was monitoring the event and laughing uncontrollably. I was familiar with this thing. Well, okay, I guess you can follow real-time commentary, but I decided, okay, I'll log in. Yes, I already had a login. I was part of it, but not a major part of this Twitter phenomenon. I logged in and started watching what the comments, the posts were. And you could hear the crowd of about 1,000 people laughing, not at the witty or angry presentations that were sometimes going overtime, like the Oscars, but the crowd was on a 5-second, 10-second, 20-second delay based on the Twitter feed. So it was a really cool, eye-opening experience. Now, the tweets weren't that newsy, but they gave a little bit of context in a Jon Stewart Daily Show way. That kind of context. So a disturbing blend of news and commentary. So that's my little story about Twitter. And maybe you watch the Super Bowl, you follow a Twitter feed. You watch the Oscars and you follow a Twitter feed. It works. Try it if you haven't already. And that one meeting at my little crazy food co-op was unbelievable. So, without further ado, let's get to business here. On my far left, Datewan Thomas from Vibe Magazine, a member of the York College Journalism Program Advisory Board. We're very happy to have you here. And then sitting next to Datewan is our friend and also member of the Advisory Board of the Journalism Program, Shane Miller from the Queen's Ledger. Newspaper guy. Okay. From the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism, we have Adam Glenn. Broadcast news guy, interactive journalism guy, ABC News, okay? So, and finally, last but certainly not least, Julie Whitaker from WNYC AM and FM, New York Public Radio. Julie carries the rank, the esteemed title, ready? Social media editor. We have great guests or what? All right, so right away, I wanted to start right in and say a pretty obvious first question. What's the first thing you would tell a rookie reporter, journalism majors? What's the advice for rookie reporters just getting into the idea of using social media, Facebook, Twitter, maybe organizing some stories and ideas on Storify, just getting reporting going using social media, specifically for undergrads? And Julie, let's start with you. What's the first thing that comes to mind? And please hunker down on the mic.
Yeah, I mean, I would say just set up your own, I think you guys already talked about setting up your own presence on Twitter, maybe things like Tumblr as well, and just getting in there, kind of finding people in your neighborhood, finding people that are writing articles that you think are interesting, start following them, do some searches, you know, who's talking about, you know, whatever story you're writing about. Are you writing about stop and frisk or gun control? Start doing some searches on those keywords and find people that are talking about it, that have interesting ideas, and start following them and listening, and then you'll get an idea of the conversations that are happening, and you can join them and you know, start asking questions and commenting and giving kind of your perspective and your story. You can find sources, you can find new ideas, and so I just say, you know, jump in, start using really smart search words and finding the people that are having those conversations that you want to report on.
Thank you. Now, Adam, why don't we take it back a half a step? And all you need to do, folks, admit it, maybe you've got the login and password, but you're not using it much. All you need to do is type in the keyword of what you might have to write an article about and take it from there, and you get better at writing the keywords.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is maybe the most obvious. Probably all of you are using social media to some extent, but the two things I think I would keep in mind. One is it's different to use it as a journalist. Use it as a journalist. So in other words, the kinds of things that Julie was talking about, to research stories and to find sources and so on, that's very different from how most of us at other times will use social media to talk to friends and so on. So think like a journalist when you're on social media. That's key, but it's easily forgotten. The other thing is it's social, right? And I think the biggest mistake I see, especially young journalists, but many journalists doing, is they treat it just as kind of a broadcast. They say, well, I have something to say, I'm going to say it. And I'm going to say it again and again. Is anybody listening? Well, I don't care, I'm going to keep saying it. And that really is not the value of social media. Social media is about the conversation. It's about engaging with people, talking with them, sharing information, sharing value. So journalistic and social engagement, those are really the key things. And keep those in your mind as you start whatever other techniques you use.
Adam, thank you. That reminds me, when I tweeted about this event, I got zero reaction from my huge number of like 47 followers. But I didn't engage them with a question. Send us your number one topic to handle. I could have easily done that. One question. Send us one question. So maybe Shane, you could take it from there. And please grab the mic.
To expound on what Adam said, we use social media now is so much like what he said. We're asking for people to send their feedback back to us. We're throwing stuff out there. We use it. Before, you had to go to a meeting, you met a source, and you called them up on the phone. Now, if we're doing an issue on something in Glendale, we go to the Glendale Civic page, and we can find all of our sources there, people we can talk to. It's all right there. And what Julie said, when you're on Twitter, you should be really smart about who you follow and what you're mentioning on Twitter. You can get noticed really quickly and fast on Twitter. I know people who have just amateurs, not even, they don't have jobs, they just follow like a congressional race. A guy, Colin Campbell, who works for the Observer, he got his job because he just was all over one congressional race, and he just thousands of followers in no time because he's just smart about who he followed, who he mentioned on Twitter, and he got noticed so quickly. Now he works for the Observer, just based solely on using Twitter smartly.
So similar question for Daytwan, and the key, as you grab the mic, is I would think we turn the volume up, no pun intended, a lot, because you've got people in show business, musicians, movie stars, you name it. So you have to handle them as a journalist, but also make sure it goes smoothly.
Yes, that particular instance, I'm pretty much caught into that a lot. I'm kind of cool with a lot of artists. And the one thing is, it's a forum, it's a big stage. You're almost, if you have enough followers, you're really on stage. And if you fumble on the mic, you fumble in front of everyone. So if I tweet, like say Nicki Minaj, and everyone sees that either she doesn't respond or she gets at me, then it turns into like a bigger thing. So that's turning the volume up or it's turning it down. I would say most recently, I was about to jump into the fray this past Thursday, Friday, but I wanted to see what was going on when everyone was saying that Lil Wayne was dead. And TMZ, they reported that he was being read his last rites and all of this stuff. And I was like, no, this is insane, because I'm really cool with his inner camp. And the inner camp wasn't relaying that back. Not to say that they were being open and honest about it, but it wasn't giving me the feel that he was actually about to expire. So I had to wait. And that's the thing about Twitter. You almost kind of like, it's like double dutch. When do I jump in the rope? And try to keep going as long as possible. That's the thing. I think it's a lot of common sense and kind of filling out the conversation, understanding your sources, knowing the facts, and a lot of journalistic intuition to understand when and how to do it. I'm a little bit more reserved. I tend to lean more so on my Twitter with music links and information like that. And I try to, let people know what's out there that's new. I'm like the new rapper guy or the new R&B song guy, because that seems to get a lot more attention than some of the more, passerby kind of conversation. But like everyone on the panel said, all of those different things accumulate to who you become on this platform.
So you heard it here. The executive editor has a beat. That's your specialty.
Yes, indeed.
That's the thing you enjoy
All
to
day.
tweet about or report about and push writers and editors to think more about and get interviews. Okay.
Definitely.
Can I tell a cautionary tale about
Absolutely.
how I got introduced to Twitter? And nobody should follow this lead, but about 4 years ago, a friend came up to me and he said, do you heard about this Twitter? I'm like, I heard people talking about it, but I really don't know what it's about. He's like, it's the Wild West of social media. He's like, anything goes on Twitter, anything. And so he had this bright idea that we would start a fake Twitter account. Does anybody know who Gary Payton is?
Yes.
Former guard of the Seattle Supersonics? Yes. He was on TNT at the time as an analysis. And so we were like, he's kind of larger than life. He's trash talks. We should start a fake Twitter account, Gary Payton. He started it on Sunday morning, and we were all just kind of tweeting on it, thinking this was just a big joke. It's Twitter. Nobody pays attention to Twitter. By Monday morning, this was 4 years ago, mind you, and not a lot of people were using it. By Monday morning, the Philadelphia Inquirer was writing about this Gary Payton Twitter account. By Wednesday morning, the New York Times had debunked us as fake and shut the entire thing down from Twitter. And that was 4 years ago when Twitter wasn't nearly as big as it is today.
Yeah.
Extremely dangerous. That
And
was
very
a
unethical.
big
And now I think it's
no,
illegal
don't
to
do this.
impersonate people on
Oh
social
my
media.
God.
Because you have to say that
Yeah,
it's a
it has to be verified
yeah.
now.
Yes, indeed.
Just to add one thing, following on what Datwan said, was one of the things that I get a lot from students, student journalists, is, I say you've got to get out there, you got to engage, be part of the conversation. They're like, me? What do I have to say, or I'm gonna make a mistake and that ruin my career? And to some extent, you have to get over that. But one of the things that is a great way to do that is you can spend some time also listening. You can kind of lurk and see what people are saying and what the conversation is before you jump in. So don't just say, okay, well, Adam Glenn said jump in, so I'm going to jump in. Listen, see what people are talking about, see what the conversation is, and then jump in and try to add something to the conversation, not just sort of ditto, but something that adds some new information or value or your own perspective. So listen before you talk.
Yeah, I would add to that two things. One, about the fake Twitter account. I think authenticity and transparency are really important on Twitter. Be clear about who you are. Have a profile picture that looks like you. Say, your name and what you do and what you're all about. And then on the listening, one of my favorite things about Twitter is that you can watch really smart people, whatever you're interested in, you can find some really smart people on those subjects and watch them talk to each other. And that is fascinating. I get to be in the room with, Dajuan talking to a rapper about, even if I don't jump in there, which, I encourage you to, you might get a reply, you might not, who cares, but you get to listen and you get to be a fly on the wall of these really cool people having conversations. And so that's one of my favorite things about it.
That listening advice leads to the next topic I wanted to try to tackle, and that is, what is your daily routine? First as journalist, but also maybe the first thing you do is check to see if Steve Martin put out an incredible tweet so you can start your day with something funny instead of something work. So whoever wants to go first there, your daily routine, personal as well as journalism, whether you need to listen to David Carr at the New York Times,
Right.
or Jeff Jarvis, the social media digital journalism guru at your institution. What's your daily routine?
My daily routine is first now, before it used to be Twitter first, now it's Instagram. I'm a huge Instagram fanatic. Before, when I was just really getting used to Twitter, I was like, oh, this is cool. I wasn't really a big Facebook fan. I learned to get onto Facebook, but Instagram, I'm very visual. So a lot of different things inspire me. So I check to see what inspires the people that inspire me, like different writers and people like that. So I check Instagram first. Then I go to Twitter, and that consumes most of my time, actually. There's a guy by the name of Elliot Wilson. I don't know if anyone in here knows, but he runs a hip hop website called Rap Radar, and he pretty much retweets or puts up photos of every rapper or no, basically every rapper that's on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. He retweets everything that they do. So that's kind of like my morning blog role, if you will, because he gathers it from all different places. Even if you follow those rappers, he somehow finds a shot that you haven't seen yet. So he's really onto that heavy. There's another young woman by the name of Karen Civil. She's like a marketer for Beats by Dre, and she has like the most insider information. She's in the camps of MMG, which is Rick Ross's camp, and she's in the camp with Young Money, and she gets a lot of information. So I check her out. And then there's another guy by the name of Combat Jack. And his commentary every day is just so cool. He's at the coffee shop after he takes his kids to school, and then he just runs down topics. He starts to prod a lot of the rappers and different people in the media with interesting questions and stuff, and then he gets this dialogue going every day. He finds a way to get the conversation going, and I love to see what his topics are. So those are some of the people that I check.
It used to be email, but I'm with Dayton. It's Twitter, like right from the first thing in the morning. I follow a lot of politicians, a lot of news organizations, and I'm bombarded with information, but it's great. It's just like, it's the best place to get the stuff. And I have two screens on my desk, and one is just Twitter, like nonstop. It's just like constantly updating.
That's so cool. On my screen, it's like a third is my Twitter timeline. Just 1/3 of my little Mac screen.
It's just constantly
It's
updating.
always on.
It's even good for breaking news. Like, we used to carry beepers or listen to like police scanners. Now there's just Twitter accounts out there that just, there's an accident 3 blocks away.
They have like the New York scanner.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you have the
Yeah.
scanner
Yeah.
on Twitter.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild.
So yeah, that's it. I mean, I spend half hour, 45 minutes first thing in the morning just
Yeah.
going over Twitter.
That leads me to another idea, which is, and it was in our headline for the flyer that we put out, and that is to organize everything you want to see. Maybe Storify has been useful for you. I don't know. I'll ask you all to just give a quick answer on that. Explain to the novices and let us know how you've used it, if it's helpful. Give your personal definition of how it's an organizer. Jump right in.
Okay. Well, just in terms of the daily routine, because I think it's critically important that you have your own kind of daily hygiene. It's like brushing your teeth. What's the first thing you do, and establish a pattern, because otherwise this stuff comes at you so fast that you can lose track. So in my case, I actually do 3 things. I start with Facebook, actually, and the reason is that I have a lot of journalists, friends, and sort of people interested in the things I'm interested in on Facebook, and I want to see what my colleagues and my friends are reading and talking about, and I get a lot of news first there. Then I go to Twitter, and I am like pretty anal about like organizing all my feeds. I use a tool called Hootsuite, and there are others like this, Hootsuite or TweetDeck. Check them out because it helps you kind of organize in little tabs what you're interested in. So for me, I might be, 5 or 6 different subjects. So I look at that, and I say, okay, well, I'm interested in, environmental issues. So I look at my environmental tab. I'm interested in digital journalism, so I look at that. Then the last thing I do is, there's a huge stream of information on just my general Twitter account, and I just dip my toe. What are people talking about in the last 5-10 minutes? And that's sort of where I leave it, and that's where I often check back. What are people whatever they're talking about, whatever topic in the last few minutes, is there something that I should be aware of and engaged in?
Can I ask you a question? Do you feel like you've gotten less anal with Twitter? I find that I have found, in the sense that I don't worry so much as I used to about missing every little thing that comes, because you drive yourself crazy.
Apparently there's this new psychological thing called FOMA, fear of missing out, FOMO. And I think I've always suffered that, and now it's even worse. Because now I can see, wow, I missed that. Oh crap, I missed this. So
That's me.
yeah,
right
it's
now.
really tough. But it's really, I think, important too. I try to do this as part of your hygiene is when to shut this off, because you can get just so overstimulated you can't do anything else. And here you gotta study and live a life and have actual FaceTime with real people, you know. So learn to shut it off sometimes too.
Julie, you want to take a shot?
Yeah, I mean, my daily routine is turning on the radio in the morning, flipping it on before I get out of bed, before I'm ready to get out of bed, hearing kind of what the stories of the day are, then maybe picking up my phone, scrolling through Twitter, seeing what people are talking about. But yeah, I have a short, on Twitter you can make lists, so I have this kind of short list of people that I think are the most interesting, like maybe I think 20 people. I follow probably almost 400 people, but these 20 people I think, like they're the ones I don't want to miss something that they say, so I have that little list that I'll just check that maybe first thing in the morning. Instagram I check at night before bed, because it's like, yeah, that's a really great source too. And I think just, making sure you find time to turn it off and actually do some reading and listening of things yourself, or watching TV, whatever it is that you're into, because otherwise you're not going to have anything interesting to contribute to a conversation. If you're not reading and learning kind of bigger things, then, you know, what are you going to be able to say to add to the conversation that's happening on Twitter? You're just going to be echoing what's already there. So spend some time turning it off and kind of engaging, you know, like giving yourself some time to provide interesting content or create something or take something in, and then go back to it and contribute what you've learned there.
Any guilty pleasures? I mean, I could only come up with one a tweet that I'm not even following Steve Martin's Twitter account, but comedians probably could start your day with a smile instead of the FOMA fear.
Right.
Fear of missing out. So a guilty pleasure.
I do have a guilty pleasure, and it just kind of started. I don't know how many people in here are used to the memes, where they're always like making fun of people with the photos and stuff. And a couple of friends, like what we'll do is throughout the day, if we're checking Instagram or Twitter, we'll send them to each other. Like we'll text them to each other, like, "Yo, this one's crazy funny." But now they have a Instagram line, like a timeline one called Boots and Wigs, and it's about people with weird hairstyles. Oh my goodness, I just found it like maybe 2 days ago, and I've been on it kind of heavy, sending it to my friend. It's so bad and it's so wrong, but it's hilarious. So that's my guilty pleasure.
I don't really have any guilty pleasures on Twitter. I find Tumblr works a lot better for guilty pleasures, because people just create ridiculous pages, and for like 3 days it'll just be everybody will just be adding stuff. I remember there was one, this is ridiculous, about 3 years ago. Just all like classic album covers, but somehow people had inserted like a taco into it. It was called Album Tacos. And that was the entire Tumblr. But I was there like every day.
You have to love that.
Well, thank you. Something in there triggered that this morning on WNYC, plug for your station. It's called Tech City.
New Tech City.
New Tech City was. I listened closely because not only did they have Ariana Huffington of the Huffington Post talking about how to disconnect, which is absurd. If you disconnect and you're not reading HuffPo, then she goes broke. But New Tech City's episode this morning talked about how newsrooms are trying to stay afloat. And the guest, strangely enough, was a guy in charge of BuzzFeed. And so you're talking about guilty pleasures. I don't recall his name, but probably. And he talked about how there's a separation between sponsored stories. I loathe the word content. I don't know what happened to me at some point, but sponsored content and regular news stories. And the news stories can be pretty soft. One example WNYC Tech City used was cats whose meows sound like "help me" or "hi there." So there is a lot of crazy guilty pleasure stuff going on. Obviously, you know that all too well. But the topic was how do news organizations as a business stay afloat today? And as I wrote in my little question when I was trying to figure this out, the gold standard used to be full page ad in the New York Times. That will get your message out if you've got the cash. Nothing better. That's the old days. So when it comes to social media, is that a way? Because the BuzzFeed guy, I wish I remembered his name. What do you think it is, Andrew?
I think it's Ben Smith.
Ben Smith, maybe. Okay. He said, what you think of as advertising standards on the web are terrible. The banner ad, you must click and get through, close, before you can read your story. It's so annoying, it's not selling anything. So my question, long-winded question, is how might the social media we're talking about help generate some revenue? How might it help the business side? How might we get some advertising revenue going and continue to hire reporters, editors, keep the lights on? Because the New York Times full-page ad is on the wane.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy right now with that. That's something that, as an organization at Vibe, we deal with. But I did see something yesterday that showed me kind of like where we are right now. There's a young man by the name of Low Key. He has a site called You Heard That New, and he basically puts out the links to all the new hip hop songs out right now. But he's so popular that whenever he mentions something on Twitter, people check it out, regardless if it's a book, if it's whatever. So he just randomly said, I'm going to check out Olympus Has Fallen again on Friday. He went to the screening for press and then just said, on Friday when it drops, I'm going again. So then the director of Hot 97, the PD, old man Ebro, that's his Twitter handle, he was like, look at you selling. Like, you're selling something. He thought that because he mentioned that he wanted to see it again, that he gotten paid to say he wanted to see it again. Because that way of promotion is so effective right now. If someone's popular on Twitter and a lot of people check them, oh, you must be selling it because you can't obviously want to see this movie again. And it just triggered that, excuse me, we're starting to look at individuals as advertising, as the New York Times full page. He's that page now. And that's happening throughout the whole media family. And I also feel as though brands, when they do that now, like as far as like if we say, hey, go check out such and such's album, they'll say, oh, they're getting paid for that. So now I have to say that kind of on my own personal page as a review or as someone that critiques the music. And hopefully they don't think I'm getting paid for that. So it's a really fine line right now where we are.
That's very well said. That is the New York Times full page ad. When Snooki gets $100,000 to say she loves the new whatever fragrance or goes to her favorite burger and fry place, whatever.
Definitely.
Okay. See, this is a very highbrow conversation. We're talking about Snooki and BuzzFeed. See, I hope this isn't too bad. Any other? I need a little bit more on the business side and how to make sure that a room full of journalism majors about to get their BAs might be able to find a place that has enough cash coming in, and business majors that are listening to figure out the technology, how we can use the technology that we're discussing today to help keep the lights on and keep hiring people, salaries, health care, 401k, beach house, big car. I say that in class, and people are like, please. Any other ideas about it?
I'll jump in again, I'm sorry. But I think it's mainly, it's still the same kind of, I say it's still the same kind of operation. You have to get scoops on stories. The reason why TMZ is hot is because they get scoops. They get the things that everyone right now is into. That's what keeps the lights on. I mean, good stories. Right now, if you put out, for at least my audience, if you put out a 5,000 word piece, they're not reading it. It's just not happening. And that's what we've been groomed to do, to put out these enormous pieces with incredible content, well-researched, and then you put out this huge story on whatever artist or celebrity is huge at the moment, and then TMZ comes out and says, like, hey, they just got arrested, and they just blow you out the water, and they were first. So business-wise, it's still the business of journalism and the background of it, but how can we use the technology? By, if you have any form of new information, getting it out there. It seems first, but also getting it out there right. If you're able to do that, and that generates views and then income.
In our last conversation on this topic, we tried to talk about branding, business, social media, and someone pointed out that the Daily News has the tendency to put a tweet out very quickly, and let's say in this example, the sports world, where ESPN will fact check it and guard so they have a higher quality threshold that it must pass. It must be checked out first.
But do they get more views? Though?
Oh, I know. The views are the name of the game. People.
ESPN gets 4 million Twitter followers, if I recall correctly.
They probably have more, right? Because mixing the new technology with the old-fashioned slows down or decreases your number of hits or views, right?
Exactly.
Right. Business side, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add that you guys had a talk about branding, right, and kind of doing, building your own brand, I guess. I don't know what the topic exactly was, but that's the idea too, as young journalists and business people, is establish who you are, what you stand for, what it is that you do that adds something to the picture, and keep building on that. Because it used to be that you would become part in journalism, you'd become part of a news organization, and your brand, you were kind of tied up with their brand. Now, really, people move from one organization to another, and through the ubiquity of all these tools, they're able to establish themselves very easily as their own person. So do that. Now, where the business opportunities come, it really is still anyone's guess. I mean, the old models are completely falling apart. Newspapers online, it's been a mess for years. They're starting to figure out, well, maybe we can charge now. Advertising on the web, for instance, and mobile, still hasn't come up to the value that it was in old days. So we don't know. But the key is be in there, establish who you are, establish your business brand as a journalist or otherwise.
And I would add for public radio, we get a lot of our money from donations. People give, they feel like the content is valuable that we're putting out, and they give us money. So, I think about, myself, I have an office job. I can't have the radio on all day, but I can look at Twitter, I can look at Facebook throughout the day. I'm working my job, I can look over, and if WNYC, the radio station, is in those places still giving me interesting information or remind me that, like, oh, they aired this really interesting interview with someone that I really like, that I can come back at the end of the day and listen to that, when I'm done working. So I just think keeping yourself or your brand, the brand you're working for, in people's day, then, when it comes time for donations, they're going to think back, what brands did I interact with? What brands mean a lot to me? What brands provided me with interesting information? Then hopefully they'll think of us, even if they weren't always able to turn on the radio.
The way we approach it at the Queen's Ledger, we don't think that we have like this one reader who basically like not only reads the print but follows us online. And so we try to reach people across all sorts of platforms. And you might get us online, you might still read us in print, you might get like a daily email blast that we send out every day, and some people follow us on Twitter. So like you said, we're just trying to like reach people in a number of different ways. And I agree with Dejuan. It's still, if there was some sort of magic formula to turn tweets into money, like we would have found it out. Twitter doesn't even make money.
Exactly.
And so it's still about quality content.
And I think sometimes you're putting out content there's an audience for, but maybe you don't have that audience currently. So you can, again, just the search box on these things is so important. I can search, we just put out an interview with, let's say Lena Dunham, who writes that show Girls. So I can go on search, find people who are really interested in Lena Dunham and be like, hey, you might be interested in this interview we just did, check it out. You can really find new audiences, new connections by using the search.
Let me throw this level in, and that is adding the word interactive. You can promote your show. I have a friend at CNBC, and when they interview a business guest, one of her jobs, in addition to finding the guest, making sure it goes out on the air okay, and writing questions, God knows what else she has to do to research the business news for her program on CNBC, she has to tweet about the guest they just got. We're going to have Alan Greenspan, former Fed chief, or you name it, CEO. So the question is, what about the interaction, though? How do you make sure, and maybe we'll start again with you, Julie, so you can get an answer. Do you literally write, do you have a question? We're going to have Alec Baldwin to talk about how he loves the New York Philharmonic so much he gave how much money? I don't know, a couple $100,000. So is it as simple as asking the people reading your tweet a question, or what's the next level of that? Getting your audience to interact with you, not just get the tweet saying, "Oh, I'll listen to that," or I'll read that story.
Yeah, I think using Twitter or any of these platforms as you're developing the story, kind of throwing your ideas out there. I'm thinking about writing about this. Is anyone interested in that? Or does anyone have something to contribute? Or putting out I really have this strong opinion. Do you guys agree? Or do you have other examples of this happening in your life or in the topics you follow? I think really using these things to kind of put out your ideas and thoughts as they're developing and as you're pulling stuff together and asking questions with it can really be a great way to get some interaction. And that way you're not just using it to broadcast. Like, look, I wrote this article. You've kind of brought people along through the whole process and made it a collaborative process. I really there's a writer for the New Yorker magazine, Emily Nussbaum, and she'll do that. She writes about television, and she'll do that. She's like, I want to write about this show. There's a character who's deaf. Have there been other TV shows where the character's deaf? If she can't remember everything, so she'll put it out there, and people will help her. Like, oh, yeah, there was this one or that one. And then a week or two later, Twitter, you'll see that article that she wrote, and I was like, man, I get to see her like working on that, and it's really cool.
I mean, we shamelessly just ask people, like, we have endorsement meetings all the time with politicians. We'll put, hey, John Liu's coming to our office in an hour. What would you ask him? You know, and as far as I don't want to say it's necessarily shamelessly promoting, but when you do a story about somebody, and if they're on Twitter, you should always mention them in the tweet so that it shows up, and then they retweet it, and it brings that audience back to you.
Yeah, we do that frequently. We
Yeah.
have the top songwriters list, and we'll include some of the songwriters, be it, you know, Sean Garrett or Solange or whoever, and then they'll end up retweeting it. And if the story is going down, once they retweet it, it jumps back up, it'll go down, and we'll send it out again with another group, and then it jumps back up. So it's strategic as well. Like we do the same
And who's
thing.
handling some of that? It's not just the individual writers and editors, but you must have a social media
Yes,
chief.
we do. Jada.
Maybe in different sections of the magazine?
Well,
or-
we have one for all platforms. Her name is Jada. She just started with us like maybe 2 months ago, and before that we had someone else. But then, like her style was really cool. But then the editor-in-chief, he found another person whose style was really cool as well. So we had them both for a little bit, and then the other one left. But Jada's really good. Now we have a new system. Once we do the story, before each individual editor would have to do it socially through the brand. I would send them out myself, but it would be through Vibe Magazine. Now I can send the link to her. I can do my personal one, and she can handle that one and work it a lot more. Because once I send that one, I'm usually off to another story, where she can work it a couple more times throughout the day.
And get the
outside
numbers
of
to go
like-
back up again.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, I didn't-
Outside of like a Hootsuite or wherever, where it's just randomly hits, you know, she kind of tailor makes it a little bit more now.
You're tweeting to promote your own stories. Are you delegating enough?
I'm not. That's so true, and that's what they get at me about. But I love to see what the reaction is personally. I just love it, and when I do get the reaction for a particular story, especially one I worked really hard on, I kind of work it a little bit more myself. So yeah, I need to delegate a little bit.
I would say don't delegate. I think you're on the right track because
Okay.
you're keeping connected with your
Definitely.
audience, you know, and that's a great way to do it, rather than sort of put up a shield in between. The other thing I was going to say though is, you know, when you ask people, you know, to give you ideas and you share a little bit about the story and get feedback from them, then share that feedback back to them. Kind of reflect back what you're getting from them, because then that reinforces that you're actually listening and that you're making use of it, and it's exciting for someone to see along the way that their idea or their question might be the one that gets asked. It's kind of like, you know, like relationship training, they say, well, if you're arguing with someone, say, well, what I hear you saying to me is I'm a jerk. And so, you know, use that. What I hear you, my audience, my community saying is this, and now I'm going with it.
I mean, for us, sometimes in the paper, if it's a big topic, we'll say, hey, what do people think about this greenway they want to put in Queens? And then with the article we run in the paper, we'll have like a sidebar that says, this is what people are talking about on Twitter. And so they, you know, they see like their comments. And you know, I guess sometimes when you see something in print, it has a certain weight to it. You know, if somebody's just tweeting at you, it's just kind of out there in the atmosphere. But once they see their tweet like in the newspaper, it's just like they're that much more engaged.
Like we have a sister brand for Vibe called Vibe Vixen. It was out as a print entity a few years ago, but now it's just strictly digital. And every morning, the editor, she ends up having, she sparks all these debates. It throws our whole morning off every day. It's just really crazy. But Beyonce just put out a song called Bow Down, and she's like cursing a lot in it. And everyone's like, oh my goodness, this is Beyonce. So Vibe Vixen, they have the question of the day. And it's usually in the morning, and they ask, like, how are you feeling about Beyonce kind of going crazy? And, I mean, it just gets flooded with tweets about, oh, I don't like it, and this is why. And then they go into it heavy. Like, one person can have, like, 4 tweets aimed at us just after that one question. So if you go across, like, I think they have, like, maybe 13 or 14,000 followers, that turns into a lot. That's a bulk of the morning going through that and seeing what the people, you know, respond to.
I want to turn it to what I'm going to call the subsection of skepticism. or caution, caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. And in that section, I'm going to zero in first on our guest Adam from the CUNY J School, because about a week and a half ago, I had a big meeting here or a big meeting at the J School, and I had a moment of enlightenment like, go to the J School, and because Glenn told me you should think about this and get a transcript, I thought, don't get a transcript, go to the meeting. So it wasn't a meeting, it was a talk where Adam interviewed NPR's Twitter godhead, Andy Carvin, right? And I'm calling this skepticism because you've got to be careful. When the news is coming in his case, he really did a lot of reporting using Twitter back in the beginning of the Arab Spring. You name the countries, whether it was Egypt, Tunisia, across North Africa and the Middle East. That was step one. There are others, Twitter reporting stories that he did, and right up to the shootings in Connecticut at Newtown. So the skepticism part, I think you might know what I'm about to say. You still need to check it out if you're using this as a reporting tool. So Adam, that section of the talk I was listening very closely because he's got a book out. Carvin at NPR has got a book out about this thing, Twitter and reporting and what's happened for him. So if I just use that one word, the skepticism, it's a traditional kind that you would always want to use when you're a reporter, and I'll end it with a cliche. Ready? Your mother says she loves you, check it out. So you got to check it out.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that you really treat pretty much everything you see on social media as just rumor, essentially. That's the safest way to go. There are occasions where, you know someone as a direct source for something, and you know it's them, you've sort of certified that. But most of it is like overhearing a conversation on the subway. You don't just hear someone say something and then go report it. You've got to check it out, and you've got to do the traditional kinds of things. You call a couple of sources. Now, what Andy Carvin does, which is a little controversial, is he uses Twitter as his way of kind of checking things out. He'll say, well, in effect, he'll say, I heard that, this is the case, but I'm dubious, or does anybody know for sure? And there's criticism of that because people say, well, you're just repeating rumors, and that takes on a life of its own. And his argument is, no, I'm actually saying I think this is problematic information, but can anybody verify it? So there's a bit of an ongoing discussion about that. But I think for most of us, the key is just take it with a lot of salt, not just a grain, but a barrel full, and check it out like you would any other information. It's vital, but it's not true necessarily.
I want to stay on this topic for another moment because referring back to that NPR Twitter chief, social media chief, whatever, what's his title now? Do you recall?
Andy Carvin is, it's like social media strategist.
Okay.
Something like that.
And he has an advanced degree in communications, but he admits right away he's not trained formally as a journalist and without a lot of experience as a journalist. But let's stay on the skepticism theme for a minute and talk about how you've maybe tapped on the brakes and tried to not go with the missing out on a story sensation, and you went back to traditional journalism, either at your station or your publications.
Well, I think that what I find with a lot of interns and new people that come in is they've grown up with social media. They're very familiar with it and very comfortable with it. And so they do kind of treat it as fact, like it's just part of their life, like how they get information. I'll give you a story that just happened last week. I had an intern, and she turned in this story. It's an innocuous story about a clothing swap in Ridgewood. But I could kind of tell from the quotes, there's just something like off about them. There were a lot of like, wow, what a great event, exclamation points, and so-and-so. I was like, where did you get these quotes? And she's like, well, I just took them off Facebook. And I'm like, you can't just take a quote off Facebook. Those people didn't realize that they were going to be picked up by a newspaper. They didn't realize that they were, quote unquote, talking to a reporter when they posted that to Facebook. So I think that, if you're very comfortable with social media, you just kind of have to step back and just be skeptical.
Yeah. I think it goes back to the Lil Wayne piece that happened recently. As an organization, we were like, all right, we all jumped on email with each other on an email feed, and we kind of talked it out within, I would say, a 10-minute period. We had, when I looked, we had about 15 to 20 different emails with like 7 different editors to see like, what did you hear? Which source? Oh, you saw this on Facebook? Did anyone Instagram anything? Any pictures? Like, it's all these different questions that we asked in our own bubble before we went out and put out what we felt was about as accurate as we could be. And then as the story is developing, we're still hitting each other like, okay, I heard this. What did you hear? All right, we're going to put these two together, and then we're gonna hit up the record label with this question. So you kind of like have a group discussion to get the best kind of question to ask the representatives to get a good statement. If you can't, then like someone like Mac Main, who's really with Lil Wayne at the time, his statement was the statement from Twitter. That was like the one that everyone used. But then, once again, you're using something from a Facebook or from a Twitter, but it's from a source that's there, not someone that's away from the camp. So there's so many little things, and it really depends on the situation. You really want to be accurate.
Julie, when it comes to WNYC, during their pledge drive recently, they said, you know, you're listening to the station, we rely on you, and by the way, because we rely on you, management studies say that member-supported, listener-supported radio and TV has been this island of calm in a storm where ABC News, CNN, NBC, whatever, they're always worrying. Magazines and newspapers worrying about how to make money in this environment. But if a public radio station that asks for donations is doing its job correctly, their revenue has stayed okay. It's remained not rosy blue skies, but better. So I'm jumping back and forth between business and trustworthiness, but that must be linked. The business model, at least during pledge drive, and I don't know how many public radio listeners there are out there. I'm not sure it fits the age group, the demographic of undergrads, but I'm just trying to direct the question your way to say that mix of trustworthiness, because I know the news division of WNYC is very careful and deliberative and does enterprise stories and is growing. They keep saying they're growing. So, and that is married right to the business point where there's a little bit of money coming in to increase your reporting staff, not cut it. So maybe you could comment somewhere on that meandering question.
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying before, I think authenticity and transparency are really important on Twitter. That, you know, if you're passing along information that you're saying, like, I heard this, or, you know, if it's dubious information, if it's not, you're not sure that it's clear, that you're kind of putting that caveat with it, like, this was heard but unverified, or maybe just waiting and having the conversation with your peers and saying, like, what do we think about this? Because people are using Twitter to find news, and they want to have reliable sources. And so, you know, being reliable may be saying, like, we're not sure that this is true, but this is what's being, you know, it's being passed around that Lil Wayne is dead. We're not sure. We haven't verified it ourselves, but here's that piece of information. Yeah, I think that you just need to be 100% transparent. Let people know where you're coming from, where you got the information, give credit to where you got it from, and let them know if you know whether or not you've verified it yourself. And yeah, sometimes just wait. I think during like after the Newtown shootings, there was, you know, a lot of information going around that was wrong. You know, they were saying this is the shooter, and it wasn't actually that kid. And before you knew it, they had pulled his Facebook photo off, and, you know, had this photo of a kid that it wasn't even him going around. And I think a good question to ask yourself as a reporter is, if I pass along this information, is it going to hurt somebody? And if the answer to that question is yes, I think maybe take even more extra time to wait and see how the facts continue to unfold, and
It's true.
And take some time with it. There's a big pressure to be first to get stuff out there, and I think you want to constantly feel a tension of, like, wanting to do that, but also wanting to be careful and considerate.
Definitely.
You know, one other thing to keep in mind too is that, you know, the internet is a very visual medium, so a lot of where you can stumble are photos and videos too. And some, you know, I mean, we all know about kind of photoshopping stuff, but we tend to look at an image or a video and think, well, that must have actually happened, which is often not the case at all, and because it can be faked, but pretty easily. But also, images can be taken out of context too. I was just reading this morning. It was kind of interesting. Speaking about memes, have any of you guys been following this? What do they call it? Like real women mannequins, like the sort of full-figured mannequins. Have any of you heard about this? Okay, all right. So, as opposed to kind of the stick figure mannequins that no woman actually looks like, right? But the photo of these mannequins went everywhere, and then it was supposed to be at an H&M store, but then somebody, I think it might have been the Post, Washington Post, said it was a hoax. And then someone finally came forward and said, well, it's not a hoax at all. These are real images. It wasn't Photoshopped, but it wasn't H&M. It was some other store, and it happened to be in Sweden, and the caption was in Swedish, and who's going to translate the Swedish to find out? But they should have, because the image went everywhere, and news organizations were picking it up and talking about it in an accurate way. So context, as well as sort of faked images and videos, something to watch for. Where are you getting the image? Is it from today, or is it from 2 years ago, which it happened to be also?
And that happened recently with a Jay-Z quote. He was talking about something pertaining to a concert that he was going to do, and one organization just took a feed from someone that they felt was credible, and the quote was from 2009, and they had to retract it and take it all back. It gets really crazy if you don't take the extra 2 to 3 minutes to really research.
It's really not worth the trouble trying to
not.
go back and clean up a mess like that. It's,
Yeah.
it's really not. The amount of time it would take you to fact check it is not worth the amount of time to restore your credibility. It's gonna-
That's
it's gonna
important.
take.
So the fact checking pays off.
Yeah.
Is
Yes.
another way to say that. The fact checking pays off. I don't want to make this into journalism 101, but that is part of our mission here. And I think that might fit with this question. With all the technology we're talking about, I think one of the basic parts of our philosophy in the journalism program is that the basic researching of your story, then the interviewing, and then suffering over the writing and following up and fact checking and making sure your basic writing and reporting skills are solid is the best way. If you have that foundation, the technology will come. And don't put the technology even on an equal footing. Make sure you're doing the basics first. I'm guessing you'll agree, but how would you dig into that? How would you expand on that? Maybe we'll start with Professor.
Professor Glenn. Well, I agree. I think that we, at the graduate journalism school, we talk about the verities, the values that are always there in journalism, like verification is a good one. But at the same time, these are the tools that are being used. And so what we try to do is to teach those values using the tools. Because the problem is that if you separate them too much, then when a student or a young journalist comes to use the tool, they won't make the connection as clearly, right? It's something different, and they'll make mistakes. So, but I think you're right. You start with those values, but you use the tools to teach them. That's how we do. And for yourself, don't just think about a classroom, because you're going to be out of this classroom soon, right? And you're going to be doing this on your own. And newsrooms don't have the resources to kind of mentor young journalists the way they did. So you're going to be teaching yourself. And so you got to remember these are things that remind yourself, well, okay, if I'm focusing on this value, what's the tool? How would I use the tool to reflect that value? And it sounds very abstract, but it's real. Think about it.
Shane, follow up on that maybe with don't separate the two too much. Don't create a gap between the traditional reporting and then how the tools can maybe help you do some fact
Well, I'll
checking.
give an example recently. Did anybody hear this thing at Forest Hills High School where the kid organized a Harlem Shake flash mob and then he got arrested? Well, we got a call about that. While it was going down, it's like, I don't know what's going on at Forest Hills High School, but it's in lockdown. There's something going on. And we went to Twitter because high school kids have phones. They're on Twitter nonstop. And so we got all these tweets about what was going on, and we didn't just use those as fact. We were able from the office to kind of piece together what exactly was going on at Forest Hills High School. This seems credible, this doesn't seem credible. Right. And then when we finally were like, all right, there's something going on. And then we went out and we did the real reporting. We talked to people, we talked to the cops, we talked to the school. But we used Twitter and as journalists saying, all right, is this credible? Is this credible? Is this credible? And we were able to, before we even got there, we kind of already had an idea what was going on instead of showing up and being like, what's going on at Forest Hills High School? And like, nothing. It was a pep rally. And then you've wasted a lot of time, And with shrinking newsrooms, you don't have a lot of time to spare, like sending somebody out for 6 or 7 hours to research a story. So,
Once again, I can use an example of another young editor in our urban space. His name is Kaz, the real life Kaz on Twitter. He's a rising star in our space. And a lot of the younger writers in our world are starting to look up to him because he's, breaking a lot of stories. He's also the editor of a magazine, and he's also the editor of Hip Hop Wired, so he's a trusted source. But since he is in his mid-20s, and a lot of the other kids that are looking up to him are in their early to mid-20s, he felt that some of the older editors were putting this cap on the younger guys, just like, yeah, you weren't around when LL was doing this, and you weren't around when Run DMC was doing this. And he was like, yeah, so that's why I have Google. He's like, and then he directed the conversation to all the people that he knows that are looking at him, and he's like, hey, young world, we have these tools now. We can actually look at these things and come up with our own, variation on what we think was going on at that time. And if we aren't right, we also have this medium that we're talking through now that will correct us. I'm sure some of the old heads will say that's wrong and this and that, da da da. So it's a whole new world as far as like a lot of the younger guys. They feel as though they don't even have to attend South by Southwest sometimes, because the experience is played out on Instagram, on Facebook, on whatever, and it's so immediate. I don't necessarily have to spend the $1,000 that it would take for the 4 days to be there. Yet we would, so we can accurately get the feel, but they can do the same thing just from the tools that are out there now. So no one's really out of the conversation anymore.
Instead of going to South by Southwest with all the stories beyond music that are happening there, all the I don't know, I'll call it digital thinking, and modern media thinking. Somebody who wants to cover it just by looking at the website and following the tweets, that leads to one question that I had on the back burner, which is take this topic in a negative vein and say, how does it hurt reporting? Mm-hmm. Somebody who might rely on a Twitter feed or Tumblr because they can't get out there and they decided they're not going to go to Austin, Texas. So who wants to pick up on that? How has it hurt? Because, we talked about skepticism, but this is a different kind of question where how has it hurt reporting? Because it is convenient in some ways, but obviously more people have prematurely died. Reports of my death are greatly exaggerated, butchering Shakespeare. So how has it hurt real reporting?
I think it hurts real reporting in the way that if Future, you can get things out of context by not being there and viewing it, like you guys were saying earlier. If Future, who's an artist, I'm right in front of him, and he gives this quote about it was amazing, and that's all you see on Facebook or Google, yes, you can be in the conversation about what he said from what you saw online, but then after that, he said it was amazing if I got paid $100,000. That's a big part of the quote that's missing, that now you've reported on or you jumped into that conversation, but you're not there to hear him say that on stage, and that part wasn't captured. You miss the bigger story. He wants more money for what he's doing, and I think that's the part that hurts the journalism aspect of it, or the fact checking, or whatever the case may be. If you see that quote online, you feel like, you know what, I'm satisfied with that. I'm satisfied with him saying it was an amazing experience, but you didn't follow up with the record label to find out what the context of it was about. So that can be one of the things, and that can go across the board, not just in music.
Even before social media, though, say if you're interviewing a politician and they send out say they're in their scandal plague, they send out a statement in a press release, that's what they want you to report. That's what they want you to think. That's what they want you to see. But if you're having a conversation with them, you follow up, you can ask follow-up questions, you can dig a little deeper, whereas, same thing with Twitter. Somebody sends out a tweet, that's what they want you to think,
I don't personally think that social media has hurt journalism. I think journalism has been hurt by a lot of things, and one of them is, a few years ago, Stephen Colbert coined a word which actually ended up in the I think it was the Oxford English Dictionary, which accepts a few new words a year, truthiness. Right? And it's something that sort of has the ring of truth, whether it's true or not. And I think, to me, the sort of culture of truthiness has hurt journalism a lot more than social media per se. And the other thing is just the business model. The way we used to do business has fallen apart to a great degree, not completely, but it's hurt most the reporters and news organizations that try to do deeper, more sort of contextual reporting, what we call investigative reporting, because it's very expensive, it's very difficult to do, and it has to go way beyond truthiness, and that's hard. I think those have hurt more than social media.
How can you explain the word truthiness as it relates to journalism?
Well, I think Stephen Colbert meant it, like most things he says, meant it ironically. It's not supposed to be truthiness. It's supposed to be true or not true. And I think a lot of journalism should be and always has been about what is true, not just what sounds like it might be true, and that's good enough. And I think that was sort of his ironic point, is that, it sounds true, so well, let's say it. Truthiness.
I might turn it to back towards the beginning of the conversation and talk about some basic tips, whether it's something like, well, should I put a photo of myself on my Twitter account, on my Tumblr, the kind of information just to get started. What should I be writing about, or where do some of my personal interests that might move over into a beat one day, and maybe we could start. We could start with WNYC AM and FM, New York Public Radio.
Yeah, I would say if you read an interesting article, look and see who wrote that article, and then go to Google and put in the search term Twitter and that person's name, find their account, start following them, and then go look at their feed and like, who are they talking to, who are they mentioning? Because if they read an interesting article or book and they said, here's who wrote it, go check out that person's feed, start following them, see what conversations are happening. If there's a musician you like, Google Twitter, that musician, find them, follow them. And I just say anything you find that's interesting, like Google our names after this with Twitter and find us, follow us, if hopefully you thought we were interesting. And I would just say really jump in there and create a feed for yourself of interesting people that are doing things that you want to be doing or talking about things that you want to be talking about. Go through, if you find one person who really stands out, go look at their follower list and go through it. Spend some time really making your feed valuable, because your feed can be as valuable or unvaluable as you make it. And so really invest some time in getting that.
This is modern networking. It's beyond Facebook and beyond LinkedIn. This is using it in a more granular. I mean, you can go in topic by topic instead of person by person.
Yeah.
But maybe you have a few more. I mean, literally like the photo versus my privacy. I mean, some students say, I really don't want to start a blog for my my online journalism class because of privacy issues. Well, there might be some ways to make it less visible, but as a journalist, you got to be out there.
So, I just want to jump in real quick. It's killing me. It was so crazy when Twitter first came out. I jumped on in like 2009, and a couple of my friends in the office, I was the editor-in-chief of Double XL at the time, and they were like, oh, we got to get on. We had a brand Twitter, but I wasn't on yet, and they were like, oh, we need your voice on there. So I was kind of skeptical. So there's this Japanese animation show that I loved at the time, and it was called Death Note, and the main character name was Light. So it's this Japanese anime picture for me. Like, I'm
Your
not
avatar.
that. Yeah, that was my avatar, basically.
I know that
And it
word.
said, and then I couldn't get my name, Datewan. Some kid in Nebraska had it. So I was upset about that. So I'm like, I want to hit him, but I'm using this Japanese character, hitting him, like, yo, I need my name. And then I ended up using, like, a nickname, like Daydog. So it stuck. And for like a year, I had this Japanese kid as me coming out with all these hip hop links, and people were like, "This is not Datewan. This is crazy. Like, this is not you." So a friend of mine was like, "You're killing your brand by doing this." So I was like, "Wow, I didn't even think about it that way at the time." So I changed over to my photo, but I still couldn't get my name. But what ended up happening is people started following me because I was putting out content that was relevant to what they wanted. And they just start calling me Daydog. So in turn, I turned my name, this Twitter handle, into a brand. And now it's a logo. And now when I go out to different things like this in different parts of the country, people are like, Daydog. They don't even say Datewan. It's the craziest thing how just changing my photo and my handle and all of that stuff turned into something way bigger. So now in certain circles, artists are like, I need Daydog to review my... Wow, you need Daydog, that other guy, to review your
How
stuff.
many years ago? Right.
Yeah, this is it's really wild. So
Yeah.
now I'm like battling. Should I change it if I can get the name? So
I think
That's
it's
what I
a
mean.
mix of being creative with it and being professional. Like, there's
Right.
some room to have like a fun profile picture, but if it is your face, then like when Dayton showed up, I knew who he was because
Yeah.
we talked on Twitter this morning, and he
Yes,
had a
indeed.
picture, and I was like, who's this guy? And so I think there is some value to having a picture of your face, but now Twitter has it where you can put a photo behind that,
Yes.
so you can be creative with it. You can have a nickname. I mean, make sure it's a nickname that your boss could call you, and it's
Yeah.
not gonna be like something offensive or embarrassing, but that you can be creative with it. And then there's a profile space where you can be like, here's where I work, or here's what
Right.
I'm interested in. So there's some room to be a little bit of both, be creative and be professional.
Yeah, definitely.
You want to follow?
Just add
I did.
something.
Yes, please do. And then next, Shane, about branding the Ledger. I mean, because you're competing with the Chronicle and all these other names. Go right ahead.
Just a quick thing, which is your brand is developing whether you're paying attention to it or not. So you might as well pay attention to it and kind of take control of it. And simple things like making a choice about the avatar, and also your Twitter bio. It's like a great short statement of who you are. And I heard someone who focuses on branding recently say, just simple. So say what you've done, what you do, and something fun. So it gives a more sort of complete picture of who you are professionally and personally.
Yes,
But
indeed.
take control of your brand, because otherwise it'll take control of you.
Yep.
I think the way
Perfect
we,
example. The kid in Nebraska. Perfect. So maybe a thought about the Ledger. I mean, you must have meetings about this. Like, how can we increase the visibility? Or maybe you
yeah,
had
we
a,
do.
a
We have
war story.
too many of them. As a matter of fact. If you ask my publisher, I don't even know until he gets the print bill that we still have 8 newspapers that we publish, because he's just so obsessed with how we're going to grow our brand on the internet. And I think the way we do it with Twitter, you see, I think a mistake a lot of the Queens Weeklies make is they use their Twitter to just, they tweet the same time every week, the same thing, where they're like, every Thursday at noon, we tweet out, here's our stories for the week. Whereas we try to like be hitting Twitter like all different times of the day. We do a lot of, we feel like since we're in a unique position that our jobs are, we get to go out and interact with politicians and be at events that people who have other jobs aren't at. We tweet a lot from those events, like so-and-so just showed up at the mayor's press conference and things like that, where kind of give people an insight into like what's going on because they can't be there,
Well, I just want to say a quick thank you, because that covered a lot of material really quickly, and we want to start to see what maybe some students, some faculty members might want to throw at you, a few curveballs, or maybe they have a few critiques. But first, let's just give a quick thank you for those ideas that we've heard so far. So who wants to follow up on some of the basics, or just getting started, or a specific story they're working on?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Tanisha. I'm Professor Moore's student. I'm just curious, as I would say you guys are all journalists, you write, you tweet, you report everything. What would you say are the characteristics or the traits that you have as qualities that make a good journalist?
Let me repeat that so we can get everybody. What are some of the most important qualities or traits when it comes to getting started, or some of the most important traits and qualities for any journalist making up the field to be a journalist or to be in journalism? Is that a fair summary?
Yes, thank you.
I think you have to be curious. But more importantly these days, I think you have to be a self-starter. If you're looking for the old school newsroom where you're going to go in and an editor is just going to start assigning you stories, just like you're going to show up and be like, you're going to do this, 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 and this. These days, since newsrooms are shrinking, reporters really need to start being their own editors, generating content, coming up with their own ideas. And you can start to do that now in college. I mean, you can start to write your own stories. If you have an online journalism, if you're blogging, you can do your own stories, and there's people out there who are willing to talk to you, even if you don't walk around with a press badge.
I mean, curiosity, I think, is hugely important. But the other thing, too, is I would describe as an inability to accept no, and not in a belligerent way, but just sort of always trying to get past the obstacles. And there are a lot of obstacles, in this profession. Being used to, people not giving information, doors closing, being yelled at, even by your own editor.
Yep.
But you just keep pushing through. You want to know what the answer is, and no is not acceptable.
I mean, I have the utmost respect for people who cover crime and breaking news. Those are the hardest stories to do. Nobody wants to talk to you. And then if they do talk to you, you get to the end, you're like, what's your name? They're like, I'm not giving you my name. And it's the people who work those beats, I just have the utmost respect for. It's so hard.
Yeah, I would say those things definitely, especially the inability to accept no. That's what's going to keep you in the game. I mean, the more no's that you knock down, the more confidence that you get, because behind that no is the story. There's something there. Definitely the curiosity. Like my wife, she's always like, she doesn't know how I'm a journalist because I'm not nosy with like family stuff. I'm like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. Y'all deal with it. Y'all deal with it. But the minute I hear like a new, I'm like, oh, I got to find out who did the production and who wrote it and all that. She's like, how do you just turn it on and off? So I have this ability to do that. On the journalistic side, I just like, especially like in the earlier days, I just love being able to take someone's story and making it bigger for other people. And now that we have social media and stuff, you have to find really creative ways on doing that. So I think it's being able to have that love for it still, even though it's changing while you're doing it. I think that's an important skill to have.
I think to expound on that, like taking somebody's story and making it bigger, it's really important to respect like everybody that you meet. You know, there's no small story. There's no like small source. You can't just like brush people off. There's polite ways to tell people like, look, I don't think that story is really right for me right now, but I'll think about it, you know, and I'll keep it in the back burner. But the people who just, you know, blow people off or treat people small aren't going to last very long trying to do this.
The whole idea of social media is tied to how journalism and media is reinventing itself. And I know at the CUNY Journalism School, the big new movement there is entrepreneurial journalism, teaching students coming up now, and we emphasize this here at York also, for our students to be inventive, to look at new ways of doing journalism and new ways of serving the community. For the students who are here from the business program, a lot of them are interested in starting their own businesses when they come out of York, or maybe to do something more locally, you know, as far as a business is concerned. What's the value for social media in startups, whether it's in media or outside of media? And what's the value in social media for connecting locally?
Well,
Startups.
Startups.
Let me see if I can sum that up. The value for startups, for small companies, as well as the value for local media. So local media.
I mean, you can spread your message and get the word out so much quicker than you used to be able to do. I mean, as far as like say a startup, or if you're talking entrepreneurial journalism, I mean, what would you do 15 years ago? Like write up a paper and print it yourself and drop it off at the 7-Eleven and hope people pick it up. You know, now I mean you can just constantly be sending your message out there. It doesn't cost you anything. It's completely free.
Maybe we could direct that, Glenn, that question to Julie, because three journalism, heavy duty journalism interests. Julie was with an organization, an international organization called Doctors Without Borders. We were joking around before because it was still based in, or just traditionally was based in, France. So it's Médecins Sans Frontières. But Doctors Without Borders, first groups of doctors going into really dangerous places to help refugees and others in need. So maybe we can try to figure out that startup question from Glenn Lewis about how it could be useful for non-news organizations, for a startup of any kind.
I mean, it's a lot of the same things, getting your information out there, talking to people, finding communities that are interested in what you're talking about, instead of just, you know, picking up a megaphone and shouting to like an audience, kind of, like I was saying, searching for those communities that are already having those conversations and kind of inserting your content or your whatever you have to say into that conversation. And then just, I think, yeah, I mean, at Doctors Without Borders, a lot of times, you know, we put out a lot of articles and slideshows and videos and things that, you know, our doctors were seeing on the ground. We would be reporting on them on our website. And so really, social media gave us a chance to, you know, we have an article saying, you know, what's going on in South Sudan. And maybe in the 4th or 5th paragraph, there's a really strong quote from our doctor or from a patient saying like what they've been through, what they've experienced. And with something like Twitter or Tumblr, you can take that quote from that lower in the story and pull it up at top. You tweet the headline and link, and then you can pull out that quote, and really someone might see the headline and read it or not read it, but then they see this really strong quote or fact or whatever it is. And it kind of gives you a chance to just keep putting the same content out in different, packaging it in different ways so to catch someone's attention. And I think it was really valuable for us in that way.
Go ahead, please.
Well, in my genre, there are a couple of people that I'm super surprised that they were able to take one situation and flip it into a new situation that they have now. One in particular is Combat Jack, who I mentioned earlier. He was an entertainment lawyer in our space. And once like a lot of the deals and a lot of the record labels started to go away, his business was kind of faltering. He knew so much about the music game, he just started tweeting about it. And those tweets about stories with Jay-Z and the rest of them, we were all like in awe because this was a lawyer who was behind the scenes giving out this information. And he had stopped practicing law at the time, but then those stories turned into a blog. The blog started to get a lot of traction, and he started to get advertising. That blog turned into a radio show. The radio show started to get really big, and he started to get a lot of big-name artists to come to his radio show in Dumbo in Brooklyn, which is like unheard of. Then that radio show turned into going to Complex Media for a TV web show that's now being carried. It's insane. All of that started from just stories on Twitter. So that's social entrepreneurship, taking content, packaging it in different mediums, and starting to get money. And then the other one is Karen Civil, who was a manager, kind of like a roadie for, I don't know, some of y'all may know Jim Jones, Cameron, Dipset. She was doing that. She lost her position there, started to tweet about what artists should do. That actually led to dealing with brands. The brand started to pick up on what she was doing, and now she's the marketing director at Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine's label for Beats by Dre. All from starting a website, a blog, a Tumblr. She merged them all together, and now she's like the queen of Instagram. And this all social entrepreneurship, but for content. And now these are the leading people giving us entertainment news that were once on the outside of the bubble. So it can happen if you kind of structure what you want to do and really hone in and focus.
I have a couple of great tweets to show up on this screen about today's event, a real world example. So I'm not just checking my email in the middle of the damn talk. Go ahead.
While you're doing that,
I'm not.
you know what Datewan was describing, I think is so promising because I've been saying a couple of times like the industry is in turmoil, the business model. I don't actually think that's necessarily a bad thing, although I feel bad for some of my friends who are in the business, but it opens so much possibility that we really haven't even begun to explore. And social, I think, is integral to that because the web really from the very beginning was a social medium, going back decades. It was about people sharing information and finding answers to questions together. And that has carried through, but now it's really emerging. And it's true for every new medium, there's a period where they kind of imitate the previous medium. So like, the first days of radio, they were doing like radio plays, like from the theater. And then first days of television, you have like guys in tuxedos reading the news in front of a camera. And I think the web has gone through that stage too, where they were just trying to take what existed and rework it. And I think social now opens up this possibility that, hey, we haven't even begun to explore the possibility of digital journalism and digital media, and social is going to be part of that, and you're going to be part of that. This is a great time to be getting into journalism.
So are we at the Shakespearean drama on like Studio One on TV stage, or are we in radio drama, or are we in tuxedos yet, reading the news, smoking a cigarette?
Getting out of our tuxedos into our bathing suits and ready to plunge into the pool.
Let me take.
I got a question from Twitter.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So at M. Branson's asks,
Oh, please tell us who that is.
M. Branson is he's a professor here in communications technology. He's watching the live stream right now, but he asked to describe a favorite story of doing journalism in the open, on Twitter and social media versus not in the open. Maybe something that is unique to the interactions that are made possible because of social media.
Doing a story in the open. I don't know as much as about doing a story in the open, but once in a while, what I'll end up doing is giving advice to certain artists out in the open. And I was, once again, last week, there's a new artist by the name of Euroleague. And I love the fact that he came out with this song called, it's so funny, My Grandmother's Plastic Covered Couch. The title alone, you see that on Twitter, you have to hit that. And basically, my grandmother had that same kind of couch. And then when you listen to the song, it was about like the pain of growing up and what happened with his grandma and how hard his life was growing up and stuff. And there were similar kind of themes within the song, so it hit me. And I just reached out on Twitter, and it was amazing like how I can have a conversation with him about something that totally hit both of us that way. And to see people say like, oh my goodness, like I have to check this song now, and to see that develop, and now a story is actually gonna happen behind him sending that link to me. And now I have other people checking out his music, all from him just sending the link to me. So a story developed and a conversation happened, and I'm telling him like, if you stay that open on all your music, people will start to follow you because then they'll believe in you because you're just being so open. And people love artists that are connected to those type of feelings. And it was amazing to see that. Even for me, I went back through it. I was like, wow, we really got deep on an open platform. So that was one of the ones.
Julie, I think you'll agree that Lehrer and Lopate in the morning, 2 back-to-back talk shows, they handle news or arts or trends so effortlessly. And one of the things they love to do, if the show is appropriate, is to get the questions from the listeners. And they say it right, and they get enough. They have enough people on Facebook and Twitter and Tumblr to be able to get the questions right over to the producers. How can you fill in fill us in a little bit about that process? That probably qualifies as an open story. Here's the topic, but we need you to drive it in a certain direction, dear listener.
Yeah, I mean, I think what they'll often do is the night before even put up, as people are kind of checking Facebook before they go to bed, maybe be like, we're going to be talking about this on our show tomorrow. Do you have any questions you would want or comments, or what's your experience with this topic? And they'll get some feedback from people, and they'll work that into the show. He might add a question for the guest, or bring up a topic, an angle to the story that he hadn't thought of before. And then as they're, just like radio, we still take callers. You can call in and talk to him, or call in and ask a question. But you can also just do it from Facebook, which, how many of us are actually like calling people anymore? I think I'm always just texting, or I'd rather just take the time to write it on Facebook. So I think he's getting a more interaction, a broader scope of people contributing or responding to a story.
Yeah, the really old-fashioned way. If I hear a show that's really great and I post the question on the NYC webpage, that's an antique way to do it. So I'm guilty. But at least I was able to do a screenshot of these tweets, email the screenshot to myself, open up my email, and put it on the screen. Okay, so look at this. Who wants to translate this? Twitter experts, people who are tweeting, translate this, raise your hand, and take a stab at it. Who is who? It's not that hard. You got the clues. Somebody go for it. Good.
All right. Julie, W-I-T, that's Julie. Tom Moore, 63. I guess I don't know who that is.
I don't have a name tag. That would be me. That would be me. I'm a good moderator. You have no idea who I am. Go ahead.
S. Miller, that would be Shane Miller. That's right there. And wow.
Oh, come on.
A. Adam Glenn, that would be Adam Glenn right here. And then of course we have Dayton, which is Day Dog.
Right.
I mean, you've been promoting your handle.
Hey, gotta do it.
So, did I hit them all? Except for one, which was you, Tom?
Right, that's okay. I should be invisible up here. Right.
I have one other example for the Twitter questioner, M. Branson.
Yes.
And this is something I think anybody can do very easily. I do a lot of live blogging, live tweeting. So I go to an event, and I'll just start picking up on what people at the event are saying, reporting. But what almost always happens is that other people are doing the same thing, and I'm listening to them, they're listening to me, and very quickly it evolves into a conversation like you were describing earlier, where the conversation is a little different from what the speakers are saying, and it might be more interesting, or at least as interesting. And then by the time that process is done, and I'm ready, typically I'll like take all of that and turn it into a column. Now that I've done my live tweeting, I'll write, I have a blog column. That conversation informs what I do as much as what the speaker said in my initial interpretation. In other words, if I hadn't had the conversation, it would have been a story poorer for it. So that's one example, and any of you guys can do it, and it's actually pretty valuable because you know, with like just a sheer force of numbers, we go cover events and do things that a lot of people don't have the time or ability to do, and then have that conversation and add to it. And that's very transparent. It's happening, you know, in real time.
I have one question about media as it relates to social media. Like I read a Pew Research study yesterday that just came out, the State of Media 2013 study, and they said that although the trends, people are moving more and more to online mediums, they are still relying on old school traditional news sources such as New York Times or such as NPR. Why aren't news organizations, like, this is mainly about broadcast, why aren't news organizations streaming their broadcasts on the internet? Well, like many of these television stations don't stream their broadcasts on the internet. I think that would be an innovative idea in terms of reaching to a brand new audience.
Well, for the radio, you can definitely get a lot of our stuff on. You can go back to our website and find the audio posted there. If not, usually it's shortly after the piece airs on the radio. And then we also have podcasts. That's huge for audio. You can, use any iTunes or whatever podcast app you like, and you can just get a constant feed of one specific show. So definitely where, it's a lot of it is the business side, just working out the, where's the money come from, I think. But yeah, I think definitely people are pushing their stuff out online. You might just have to wait.
Right, the question, thank you, Andrew, that question about what would happen at a TV news operation if they just streamed their show real time as they were on CNN, for example, streaming what they're doing all day long, which I'm assuming, I have not checked, but they don't do that. They don't do that.
Yes, they do.
CNN does?
They do.
Okay, so how about New York One? Probably not. Okay, so they obviously want to have one advertising channel of revenue where, well, you're only going to be able to advertise with us on air traditional TV. But radio's decided to live stream, WNYC, 1010 Wins, 880. And the funny thing is, they're advertisers that choose to buy time on the web feed that's not quite as nicely coordinated. You can hear an ad will come on WCBS 880. It'll be like, okay, well, used cars are on sale with no financing. Come on in. All you need is $50 and a paycheck stub. And it won't fit in with the anchor coming on. So it's still evolving. So that good question. Some people who are embracing it on radio, for example, are still figuring it out.
I mean, and just to add, it's Andrew. Yeah, just to add, I mean, really, there's one reason. That's the affiliates, the local stations, for instance, that air this news programming and attach their own advertising to it. So there's this, and this is very true in a lot of the business. There's a legacy business. There's a sort of a process, a very elaborate structure that has been there for decades, and it's kind of hard, I think, for networks, particularly to extract themselves from it, even if they wanted to. But I would just say, go beyond, to me, like ABC News, which is now talking about a kind of a Hulu-like stream. To me, that's not innovation. I beg to differ with you. I think what's innovation is saying, how do people actually watch news on their phone? Are they going to watch, World News Tonight for 20 minutes on their phone? Probably not, but they might watch, 15 seconds. They might, Vine, which is the new video product that Twitter has, is 6 seconds.
Yeah.
Well, that's short, but it's really short, but, you know, maybe that's where innovation is going. So I would encourage you to think about how you would watch video. What would you watch, and what would people around you watch, and innovate around that.
I think you saw newspapers kind of evolve that way. When the internet first came out, we were just kind of throwing our newspaper on the internet. And we were finding
Right.
people weren't really consuming the news that way. You know, you had to like tailor it for the internet. You know, you couldn't just
Yeah.
take your newspaper and throw it up online. Like I noticed, like some newspapers when they first started, they would just throw up PDFs that you like flip through the pages. It was just like what their newspaper looked like if it was in front of you. It turns out that's no good on the internet because the internet's interactive. You need to link to stuff. You need to be moving around on the internet. So
Yeah, I would
think
say,
what
yeah.
he's saying, like TV hasn't figured out how people can consume
Throw
it.
up is a
Many
good
newspapers
yeah,
are adding
phrase.
multimedia to their story writing.
Right. But I do feel like New York Times is still an innovator in that. I just took a flight to Vegas, and on the JetBlue flight, they have New York Times like TV, and they have so many different stories that aren't produced for the site that are on that medium. Like,
Because I've seen that.
yeah, like they had a Jerry Seinfeld session where he's talking about the anatomy of a joke about Pop-Tarts. And it was the most amazing thing. It was like maybe 5 minutes long, and you wouldn't see that in the actual paper. But it's produced just as well and with as much quality as anything else that they do. So it's just finding new ways of doing what you do.
We have time for one more quick question. Let's go all the way back.
Okay, you talked about Facebook and Twitter, and how it's being used to spread media. And can any of you guys explain how Storify is used to spread media around? Because like I don't know what it is, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people aren't used to it.
Let me recap that just so we can get it a little more clearly for the whole audience, and that is that what's the best way to use it? What is Storify? Whoever wants to grab that for a basic explainer.
I'll be first to say I don't use it, and I haven't. But that's not to say like I'm not open to check it out. I've definitely heard of it. There's also this thing that I have is like once I get to one of the networks and I'm kind of used to it, I'm locked in, and someone has to introduce it to me. Just like Phoebe is now like the new rage. And I have it, and I was like, you know what, today I'm going to do it because I'm on a social media panel. So I'm going to join Feed today, but Storify I haven't checked out.
I think Storify is useful because Twitter, you know, there's just constantly new stuff coming in the stream and everything gets pushed back into history. So the way I've used Storify is kind of capturing a conversation or reactions to a certain event and kind of locking them down into one page, like pulling in tweets and saying and saving it. And then you can link to it and be like, here's that conversation that happened yesterday or an hour ago. And you can kind of collect them as one narrative. You know, different reactions from people responding to the Super Bowl or to the Oscars or whatever, or people, everything you tweeted about a certain television show you happen to be watching or a book that you read or whatever, you can kind of capture them on one page as a story, and then and kind of send people there, because otherwise you're like, well, scroll back in your Twitter timeline until you find the day at this time and hour, and that's just like too hard. They're not going to do that. So that's kind of a way you can like capture something that happened on Twitter, which is so fast paced, and kind of keep it there for history and archiving.
We should wrap up a few minutes before 2, so one more quick question. Well, okay, Polana. Polana's an editor on our school paper. In fact, she's the online editor.
Right.
Hi, I'm Polana, and right now, Pandora's Box, which is a school newspaper, we're a monthly paper. So right now, my goal is to try to build that social media presence, and we're doing good. You know, we just revamped the website. But because we are a monthly paper, it is harder to try to get a lot of views on an issue or something about Obama, about, you know, his State of the Union address that was in February. So what do you think are some of the things that I can do to build that social media presence?
Let me
as
just
a monthly paper.
Let me recap that. So the best ways for a monthly publication to use social media, to use the web, to use to use mobile.
Right.
That's the thing we haven't said too much. To use mobile to get more views of the school paper's website.
Yeah.
I mean, that's your thing.
I guess I publish a weekly, and so I kind of run into the same problem on a smaller scale. Something happens on a Wednesday, it's not gonna be in our paper until Thursday. So what I do with my reporters is they cover something on Wednesday, they come back, they write 200-300 words, it goes up on the website immediately. It's not a fully fleshed out story yet, but I kind of have like this inverse proportion, like the sooner that you're getting it up, the shorter and more succinct it can be. So that goes from like a tweet that's happening right now is only 140 characters. A story that happened, that morning that we're getting up on the afternoon is a couple hundred words. Next week when it's in the paper, you better have talked to like 4 or 5 other people that are going to like make the story more, it's gonna still be fresh. There's gonna be new stuff going on with the story as it evolves over time. So your website, you gotta update. It's hard because I'm sure you're dealing with students who also have schoolwork and they can't just like drop everything and give you 300 words right away. But that's how we try to approach it.
Well, Glenn and the other faculty will probably kill me for saying this, should I say? But we're almost done, so I can sneak out of here. I would say that the way to do it is to, I don't know exactly how you staff it, but find a student who can do social media or has some comfort level with them, and then let them go out on their own and hijack the whole damn thing. And what I think you'll find is that they will find ways to do things that, because you're vested in this sort of monthly cycle, that you wouldn't think of, that will seem haywire to you, but it will actually help build a social presence that they might find out, well, who's working on what, and I'm going to tweet that. And some of the reporters might say, well, I'm not ready. Well, too bad, get ready.
Something that we implemented at our office is what I found with the reporters, what they do is they cover something on Wednesday, and in their head, like, oh, I got 4 days to work on this. I'm gonna put it off, and then it gets to be Monday night, and I'm like, where is this story? You've been sitting on it for 5 days. So we now have, every morning we send out an email to about 3,000-4,000 people. And so it's really like changed the culture in the newsroom where we think like a daily, even though we don't publish like a daily. So we're constantly thinking about, we need content, constantly coming up with content. Because I'm sure what you get is you have somebody cover something at the beginning of the month, 4 weeks later, you're like, how is this not done yet? Why are you pushing up against the deadline? So
That's such a good way, I think, for us to put a period at the end of this sentence. Even at a monthly, think like a daily, and social media can be a big part of that. So you just wrote it on your hand?
Yeah.
Good. See? Good. I hope it was with a Sharpie. So let me just do a very quick thank you to our 4 guests here. They all deserve a round of applause, by the way. From WNYC Radio, AM and FM, Julie Whitaker, thank you very much for coming. Adam Glenn from the CUNY Journalism School, right in Times Square, an amazing place, the CUNY Journalism School, Graduate School of Journalism.
Come visit.
Shane Miller, Queens Ledger, thank you very much for coming. The Real Queens News. And Datewan, thank you very much for telling us so many stories. From Vibe Magazine. And also thank you to the audience. You guys have been very good, and you had a lot of good questions at the end.